What happens when one of Hollywood's most respected actors walks onto a talk show set expecting a normal interview, only to be blindsided by a host who seems more interested in stirring up controversy than having a real conversation? In just 33 seconds, what started as a simple question turned into one of the most explosive moments in daytime television history, ending with an Oscar winner walking off set and a host left speechless in front of millions of viewers. Denzel Washington arrived at the studio that morning like he had done hundreds of times before. He was there to talk about his latest film, his career, and maybe share a few stories that fans would enjoy. The audience was packed, cameras were rolling, and everything seemed normal. But from the moment he sat down across from Tamron Hall, something felt different. The first few minutes went smoothly enough. Tamron asked about the new movie, and Denzel answered with his usual charm and thoughtfulness. The audience laughed at his jokes. Everything was going exactly as it should. But then Tamron shifted in her seat, and her tone changed. "So, Denzel," she said, leaning forward with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "There's something I've been dying to ask you. A lot of people have been talking about how you choose your roles these days. Some critics are saying you're playing it safe. What do you say to that?" Denzel paused for a moment, clearly choosing his words carefully. "Well, I think when you've been doing this as long as I have, you learn what stories are worth telling. I'm not interested in doing things just for shock value, or because someone thinks it'll be edgy. I want to do work that means something." Tamron nodded, but there was something in her expression that suggested she wasn't satisfied with that answer. "Right. But don't you think there's a difference between meaningful work and just doing what's comfortable? I mean, when was the last time you really challenged yourself?" The audience got quiet. You could feel the tension starting to build. Denzel sat up a little straighter, and his jaw tightened just slightly. "I challenge myself every single day. Every role is a challenge. Every character requires me to dig deep and find something real. Just because I'm not doing what someone else thinks I should be doing doesn't mean I'm not pushing myself." Okay, Tamron said, holding up her hands like she was trying to calm him down, even though he was perfectly calm. "I'm just saying what people are thinking. You know, there are younger actors out there who are really taking risks, doing things that make people uncomfortable. And then there's you, doing these kind of safe, predictable roles." Denzel's eyes narrowed. "Safe and predictable? Is that what you think?" "I'm not saying that's what I think," Tamron replied quickly, though her tone suggested otherwise. "I'm saying that's the conversation happening in Hollywood right now. People are wondering if Denzel Washington still has that fire, or if he's just coasting on his reputation." The audience was dead silent now. A few people shifted uncomfortably in their seats. This wasn't what anyone had come to see. They wanted to hear stories about movie sets and funny anecdotes, not watch their host attack a beloved actor. Denzel took a deep breath. "Let me tell you something about fire. Fire isn't about being loud or controversial or doing shocking things just to get attention. Fire is about passion for the craft. It's about showing up every day and doing the work, even when nobody's watching. It's about integrity. And I've never lost that." Tamron laughed, and it wasn't a friendly laugh. "Integrity. That's interesting coming from someone who's been accused of being difficult to work with on set. There are stories, you know. People talk." "People always talk," Denzel said, his voice steady but firm. "That doesn't make it true." "So you're saying all those stories are lies?" Tamron pressed. "Every single person who's ever had something negative to say about working with you is just making it up?" "I'm saying that you're sitting here trying to create drama where there isn't any," Denzel replied. "I came here to talk about my work, not to defend myself against gossip and rumors." Tamron leaned back in her chair with a satisfied smile, like she'd just proven some kind of point. "See, this is exactly what I'm talking about. You can't even handle a few tough questions without getting defensive. How are viewers supposed to believe you're this humble, grounded person when you react like this?" Denzel stared at her for a long moment. Tough questions? Is that what you call this? Because from where I'm sitting, it seems like you invited me here just so you could take shots at me on national television. Oh, come on, Tamron said, waving her hand dismissively. Don't be so sensitive. This is what interviews are. If you can't handle it, maybe you should stick to those softball interviews with people who just want to praise you all day. The audience gasped. Several people exchanged shocked looks. This had gone way beyond uncomfortable and had crossed into something else entirely. Denzel's publicist, sitting off to the side, looked like she was about to have a heart attack. Sensitive? Denzel repeated slowly. You think I'm being sensitive because I'm not going to sit here and let you disrespect me? Disrespect? Tamron laughed again. How am I disrespecting you? By asking you real questions instead of kissing your feet like everyone else does? Come on, Denzel. You're a big boy. You can handle a little criticism. Denzel shook his head slowly. This isn't criticism. This is you trying to make yourself look good by tearing me down, and I'm not going to be part of it. Oh, here we go, Tamron said, rolling her eyes. The victim card. Classic. I'm not playing victim, Denzel said, his voice getting harder now. I'm simply recognizing what this is. You brought me on your show under false pretenses. You said you wanted to talk about my film, my career, my life. Instead, you're sitting here trying to provoke me, trying to get me to lose my temper so you can have some viral moment for your show. Tamron's smile faltered for just a second before she recovered. That's ridiculous. I'm doing my job as a journalist. I'm asking the questions that people want answered. No, Denzel said firmly. You're trying to create content. There's a difference. A journalist seeks truth. You're seeking clicks and ratings. The audience started murmuring. Some people were nodding in agreement. Others looked shocked that this was happening at all. The cameramen didn't know where to point their cameras. Everything had gone completely off the rails. Well, excuse me for trying to have a real conversation instead of just letting you promote your movie, Tamron shot back. Maybe if you were more interesting, I wouldn't have to push so hard to get anything worthwhile out of you. That was the line. That was the moment where everything changed. Denzel went completely still. His face didn't show anger exactly, but something colder. Something more final. You know what? He said quietly. I've been doing this for over 4 decades. I've sat across from some of the best interviewers in the world. I've had tough conversations. I've answered hard questions. But I have never, in all that time, been treated with such blatant disrespect as I have in the last few minutes. Oh, please, Tamron started, but Denzel held up his hand. I'm talking now, he said, his voice cutting through the studio like a knife. You had your turn. Now it's mine. You invited me here as a guest on your show. And from the moment I sat down, you've done nothing but insult me, belittle my work, and try to provoke me into some kind of reaction that you can use to make yourself look important. That's not what I was doing, Tamron protested, but her voice had lost some of its confidence. That's exactly what you were doing, Denzel continued. And the sad thing is, you don't even see how transparent it is. You think you're being clever, being edgy, asking the tough questions. But really, you're just being rude. There's nothing brave about being rude to someone who came here in good faith. Tamron's face was starting to flush. I don't have to sit here and listen to this. You don't have to, Denzel agreed. But your audience does. They came here expecting to see a conversation. Instead, they're watching you try to score points at my expense. And I think they're smart enough to see what's really happening here. The audience erupted in applause. It wasn't the polite, encouraged applause that usually happens on talk shows. This was real, spontaneous, and loud. People were actually cheering for Denzel. Tamron's face went from flushed to pale in about 2 seconds. I was just trying to, Tamron started, but her voice was drowned out by the applause. Denzel stood up. He carefully removed his microphone and placed it on the chair. The audience got even louder, cheering and clapping. Some people were standing now. "Where are you going?" Tamron asked, and for the first time, she sounded genuinely rattled. "We're in the middle of an interview." "No," Denzel said calmly. "You ended this interview about 5 minutes ago, when you decided that attacking me was more important than having an actual conversation. I'm just making it official." "You can't just walk off my show," Tamron said, standing up now too. Her voice had gone from confident to almost pleading. "Denzel, come on. Sit back down. Let's talk about this." "There's nothing to talk about," Denzel replied. He looked out at the audience and gave them a small, genuine smile. "Thank you all for being here. I'm sorry you had to witness this. You deserved better." The audience went wild. People were shouting their support, telling him they loved him, thanking him for standing up for himself. Tamron looked around desperately, like she was trying to figure out how to regain control of the situation. But it was too late. She'd lost the room completely. "This is unbelievable," Tamron said, trying to sound indignant, but mostly just sounding desperate. "You're really going to walk off because I asked you a few hard questions?" Denzel turned back to look at her one last time. "They weren't hard questions, Tamron. They were insulting questions. There's a difference. And I'm not going to stand here and explain that difference to you because I think you already know it. You just don't care." "I was doing my job," Tamron shouted. "Then maybe you need a new job," Denzel said simply. With that, he turned and walked toward the exit. The audience was on their feet now, giving him a standing ovation. People were clapping, cheering, some were even whistling. It was the kind of response usually reserved for the end of a great performance, not the middle of a disastrous interview. Tamron stood there, frozen, as her guest walked off her set. Her mouth was open like she wanted to say something else, but no words came out. The producers in the control room were probably losing their minds, trying to figure out how to handle the situation. Should they cut to commercial? Should they try to keep filming? Nobody knew what to do, because nothing like this had ever happened before. Denzel reached the exit, and just before he walked through, he turned one more time. The audience quieted down, wanting to hear if he had any final words. Tamron looked at him with a mixture of anger and something that might have been fear. Fear that she'd just made the biggest mistake of her career. "I hope you got what you wanted," Denzel said, his voice carrying clearly through the studio, "because you just lost something you can't get back." Then he was gone. The door closed behind him, and for a moment, nobody moved. The audience slowly started to sit back down, but they were buzzing with conversation. People were talking to each other, pulling out their phones, probably already posting about what they'd just witnessed. The cameramen were still filming, not sure what else to do. Tamron finally found her voice. "Well," she said, trying to sound casual, but failing miserably. "I guess that's one way to end an interview." A few people in the audience laughed, but it was uncomfortable laughter. Most people just stared at her in disbelief. She'd tried to make a joke, to lighten the mood, but it only made things worse. It made her look even more out of touch, even more like she didn't understand the gravity of what had just happened. "Let's take a quick break," Tamron said, and her voice cracked slightly. "We'll be right back." The cameras cut, and the studio erupted into chaos. Producers rushed onto the set. Tamron's team surrounded her, probably trying to figure out how to spin this. The audience was still buzzing, still talking, still processing what they'd just seen. Some people were already heading for the exits, not interested in seeing the rest of the show. They'd gotten more than they came for. Backstage, Denzel was being met by his publicist, who looked equal parts horrified and impressed. "I can't believe you just did that," she said. "I can't believe she thought she could talk to me like that," Denzel replied calmly. He wasn't angry anymore. He wasn't upset. He was just done. Done with the disrespect. Done with the games. Done with hosts who thought they could boost their ratings by tearing down their guests. "What do you want to do now?" his publicist asked. "I want to go home," Denzel said, "and I want to never think about this again." But of course, he would think about it again. Everyone would think about it again. Because what had just happened wasn't just a celebrity walking off a talk show. It was a moment that crystallized something people had been feeling for a long time. The way interviews had become more about confrontation than conversation. The way hosts seemed more interested in going viral than in actually connecting with their guests. The way respect had been sacrificed at the altar of entertainment. Back in the studio, Tamron was getting an earful from her producers. They were trying to figure out how to salvage the rest of the show. Should they address what happened? Should they pretend everything was fine? Should they bring out the next guest and hope everyone forgot about the disaster they'd just witnessed? But people wouldn't forget. The audience members who'd been there would tell their friends. The people at home who'd been watching would post about it online. The clip would be shared thousands of times before the day was over. And through it all, one thing would be crystal clear to everyone who saw it. Tamron Hall had made a massive mistake. She'd had one of the most respected actors in Hollywood on her show, and instead of treating him with the dignity he deserved, she'd tried to use him as a stepping stool. She'd tried to make herself look tough and uncompromising by being rude and dismissive. And it had backfired spectacularly. The audience had turned on her. Her guest had walked out. And worst of all, she'd revealed something about herself that couldn't be taken back. She'd shown that she valued ratings over respect, controversy over conversation, viral moments over genuine connection. When the show came back from commercial, Tamron tried to continue like nothing had happened. She brought out her next guest, asked her prepared questions, smiled at the appropriate moments. But everyone could see through it. The energy was wrong. The audience was different now. They'd seen behind the curtain, and they couldn't unsee it. In living rooms across the country, people were texting their friends about what they'd just witnessed. "Did you see Denzel walk off Tamron Hall's show? She was so rude to him. I can't believe she thought she could talk to him like that." The reactions were overwhelmingly in Denzel's favor. People respected him for standing up for himself. They admired him for not playing along with what was clearly an attempt to manufacture drama. And they were angry at Tamron. Angry that she'd wasted everyone's time. Angry that she disrespected someone who'd come on her show in good faith. Angry that she seemed more interested in creating a moment than in having a meaningful conversation. The rest of Tamron's show limped along awkwardly. Her remaining guests could feel the tension. The audience was checked out. Everyone was still thinking about what had happened with Denzel. Everything else felt pointless in comparison. When the show finally ended, Tamron tried to give her usual upbeat closing remarks, but they rang hollow. "Thanks for watching, everyone. See you tomorrow." But would people see her tomorrow? Would they want to, after what they'd witnessed today? Meanwhile, Denzel was already in his car, heading home. His phone was blowing up with calls and messages, but he ignored them all. He'd said what he needed to say. He'd stood up for himself in the moment, and that was enough. He didn't need to rehash it, didn't need to explain himself to anyone else. The people who mattered would understand. The people who didn't understand weren't worth his time. As his car pulled away from the studio, Denzel felt a sense of peace. Yes, the interview had been a disaster. Yes, there would probably be some fallout. But he'd done the right thing. He'd drawn a line and refused to cross it. And in a world where people were constantly being pushed to compromise their values for the sake of entertainment, that meant something. Back in the studio, as the audience filed out and the crew started breaking down the set, people were still talking about what had happened. The cameramen, the stage managers, the producers, everyone had an opinion. Most of them were on Denzel's side. They'd seen Tamron's questions, heard her tone, watched as she'd pushed and pushed until her guest had no choice but to leave. "I knew it was going to be bad when she started with that playing it safe question. one cameraman said to another. Yeah, but I didn't think he'd actually walk, his colleague replied. I thought he'd just give her a cold answer and move on. Would you have stuck around? The first cameraman asked. If someone was talking to you like that on national television? His colleague thought about it for a moment. No, he admitted. I probably would have walked too. And that was the thing. Anyone in Denzel's position would have done the same thing. Because at a certain point, it's not about being professional or taking the high road. It's about self-respect. It's about refusing to participate in your own humiliation just because someone thinks it'll make good television. Tamron retreated to her dressing room after the show ended. She closed the door behind her and sat down